I'll hit my Instagram page up. I got to do this co-parenting class, and my soon-to-be ex is trying to yeah, you can have that. Trying to figure out this test I have to take tonight before we go in tomorrow. So did you find it?
You have to sign in to access your spam.
Okay, I can't do this right now.
No, that's fine. But I think you have to sign in or something. Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Kendra just sent me a picture of Levi at the computer waiting for us to come up so he can see Daddy on. That's pretty cool.
5 people are on. What's up, Mr. Hagan Lee? Hey. Let me post something real quick. Man, I've had a heck of a week.
Hey, welcome to my world. Whew. I drove, I left Sunday night or Sunday afternoon about, 3:30, 4 o'clock. Drove all the way to Illinois. It was about a 14, 15-hour trip. I stopped and took a couple-hour nap on the side of the road. Got here at like 8 o'clock in the morning, and training group all met up at 9:30, and we went to training. And yesterday the wind was howling. I felt like everything was beating me from every direction. I got into bed last night, closed my eyes, and did not move until 5:30 this morning Central Time, which means 6:30 Eastern, which is when I'm usually stirring about that time. That internal alarm clock going off.
Yeah, I hear you. Mine is set for I've been flying from Mountain Time to the East Coast, back to Mountain Time, back to East Coast, back with Bassmaster, and now I wake up at 4:30 in the morning for Bassmaster events, but now I'm waking up at 2:30 in the morning because my biological clock is set at 4:30, and the last 3 nights I've been home from the last Bassmaster event, I've literally getting up at 2:30 in the morning wide awake, and now I'm tired. Yeah. So we got 15 people in here. So tonight we're going to change things up. It's my fault, although hopefully it's a blessing in disguise, because this is a pretty cool topic and informative discussion we're going to have tonight. I didn't have a bird boy, so I didn't get around to doing my homework with Tanner this week. Plus I was at Bassmaster. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to frame up the HRC Grand. We're going to talk about it. I, for one, know probably less about it than most everyone on here. So Stephen is going to talk about what the HRC Grand is all about. How are you going to talk about the history, or are you just going to talk about the setup?
We can just talk about what it is, what it represents, and the luster behind it. There's a lot of debate, and everybody's got their own favorites and their own belief of what is the best and what is the greatest. And I'm not saying the Grand is the greatest, but I would definitely say, without doubt, that the Grand is the hardest hunt test that's out there, primarily because of the standard and the expectation that they set forward in it. So oops. Am I there?
We're live again. It just did another 3-second countdown. I have no idea why. I've got 4 bars.
So you're good.
Anyway, yeah, we're good. Go ahead.
So it's like, you walk into a class and the professor says, "Hey guys, everybody's got an A today, and we're going to, everything you do from here on is going to detract from that score. So, everybody's got 100, and every time you have a misdemeanor on your work, we're going to drop you a percentage point." And the difficulty behind a class like that is that you have no chance to bring yourself up. The score that you have on day one is the highest score you can possibly have. And that's kind of the way the Grand works. It's on a cumulative scoring. You have 2 judges at every series. The first 4 days of it are retriever trial setup. So you'll have 2 land tests, 2 water tests. The fifth series being an Upland test. But a perfect score at the Grand is a 2 from each judge. So a cumulative score of a 4. A marginal score is a 1. There are times that you could get split scores. You could get a marginal from one judge and a solid score from the other. That's not your run of the mill norm score. Normally, if a judge sees a markdown, if one judge sees it, the other one's going to see it as well. So an average score or a marginal score is a 1. A failure is a 0. If you receive a 0 from any judge at any time, you're automatically failed. And there are some numerical loopholes that you could get into, but the safe way to look at the scoring system of the Grand is in 3 of the first 4 days, you have to have perfect scores from the judges. You have to have 2s in order to carry through. Like I said, there are some numerical loopholes when you get to day 3 and day 4, but that's not necessary to understand. You can just warrant yourself that in 3 of the 4 days you need to, and this is, I'm going to tell you the great secret to passing the Grand. Here it comes. I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. The best way you can possibly pass the Grand is you don't give the judges anything to judge. And if you're entirely forgettable, if the judge watches your dog run and then flips the page and then goes, "What just happened?" that probably means that you got a good score. Because if your dog goes up there, they don't have to step on every mark. They don't have to line every blind. But if they don't have to make notation about this dog had poor line manners, this dog had to handle to the area of the fall, this dog had multiple cast refusals on the blind. If they're not having to make those type of notations, if they just go, "Man, that dog just had a good set of marks and ran a good blind," and flip the page and it's over, then that means that you're going to get good scores. And 3 of the first 4 days, like I said, you have to have clean scores to carry through. So that's what I mean about walking into that classroom in college and the professor saying everybody's got 100 and you can only go down from here. It does not matter how good you do the test. If you're above the approved standard, it doesn't matter how well you do. You're still only going to get, at best, a pair of 2s, 1 from each judge. And if you have your bobble that equates to a markdown, your handle to the area, your poor line manners, your multiple cast refusals on a blind, those are examples of things that will get you marked down. Once you get marked down and get your marginal scores, the Grand is the only place in the world where a 1 + 1 = 0. You get a marginal score on Monday, and let's say this Grand starts on Saturday. Let's say you get a marginal score on Saturday, and you absolutely destroy the test on Sunday, just couldn't do it any better, and you get another marginal score on Monday, then you're out because there's 1s in there. There's 1s + 1s = 0, which is a failure, and you don't average out. This is what makes
you get a 2 or a 1 or a 0.
Well, that's your scoring system. That's each judge on each test is going to score your dog a 0, a 1, or 2. And if you get 1s multiple times, like I said, there's some numerical loopholes. Let's not get into that. If you get 1s on Saturday and 1s on Monday, you don't, even though you may have passed that test, you don't average out with your scores. And it's just so hard to be that good that many times and that consistently. You see dogs that are really good weekend dogs that don't do good on at the Grand because they can't hold it together for 4 or 5 series. And you see other dogs that may not be great weekend dogs that handle the Grand really well because typically you're only running 1 series a day. And the owners can take time to take that dog and go burn the energy, do the training necessary to achieve that level of perfection for that very small amount of time. It's just such a varied deal as far as the ability of dogs that are able to be good at events like this. You know, when you think about a dog on a professional truck like mine, when typically I'm running all day, that dog's got to sit on that truck for 23 hours of the day and be willing to turn on that switch and be really good, and turn off that switch and chill out. Because as hard as we're training right now, you know, I left the field and came straight here to start, you know, the retriever connection. We started this morning early. We trained all day long. Those dogs are tired. They want to be in the truck and they want to sleep. But when we start running, some dogs just can't handle the excitement of sitting on that truck and hearing all the gunshots and all the excitement based around the event. They can't internalize all that. So it just takes a really special animal to be able to sit there, wait their turn, and when their turn comes, to be that good for that short amount of time, and then be able to do that every day. It's just it's a very, very big challenge. You know, if you compare the Grand to the Master National, the Master National is judged on an average. So if you have a poor blind that is acceptable but not up to snuff, you can go run a really great blind in the next series and bring your average up. Same with your marks. You can be bad, not failure bad, but you can be bad, and then you can come back and run a really good series and bring your scores up. And you need to have more good scores than bad in the Master National. But at the Grand, you have your poor score, and that's it. And you can only do that once and get away with it, so to speak. So go ahead.
Yeah, I got a couple questions for you. What's the average age of the dogs on your truck?
On my truck?
For the Grand.
Yeah, the youngest dogs that I'm running this year, the youngest dogs, I may have a 3-year-old, maybe. Most of my dogs are right there, that 3 to 4 starting range, and I have up to 8 and 9-year-old dogs. So I would say probably my average dog age is probably somewhere around 6. This is not a young dog game. It's not that young dogs can't pass it, but again, being able to handle that exuberance, being able to handle that excitement level, and contain it and channel it to the right time. That's something that a lot of times comes with age and maturity.
That was going to be my next question: is what kind, like, you know, you just described kind of what it takes, but what kind of dog? Like, when do you recognize a dog is ready for the Grand? What kind of dog does that take?
That's a great question. You know, when you look at a dog like Tanner, for instance, you know, what would keep Tanner from being Grand caliber right now? The precision of his work. That was a given. The precision of his work, getting more precise on his blinds, being prompt and not having to ask multiple times to get directional change. Understanding, you know, his drive is great. That's not a problem. But I would say that the things that Tanner, he just needs to be polished, and he needs to become more of a team player.
I mean, if you had him for 3 more years, could you get Tanner to that level? The Grand?
No doubt. Absolutely. You don't have to be invincible to be a good Grand dog. You just got to know how to get to the birds, know how to hunt precisely, know how to run good team level blinds. You know, you don't have to line all the blinds. You need to know how to make progress, you know, to the blinds on every cast. And like I said, being a team player is just such a big thing. That's for Tanner. That would probably be his biggest hurdle is knowing how to be a team player and let you take control when necessary, not letting Tanner run the show. Because where it would be difficult in the Grand with Tanner is when it comes to damage management. When you're going to get your marginal score, let's say you got a handle on a mark and he's not in position to be handled quickly and efficiently. He doesn't have that big recovery overcast to get 40 yards towards the bird. Where I would perhaps be in shape to give him a marginal score, he might go out because he doesn't handle to the bird quick enough. He doesn't give a great recovery cast to get where he needs to be. A lot of dogs like Tanner pass the Grand only because they never get in a position to need help. If they go out there and mark all the first 4 series super well and don't need to be handled, then that's a crisis averted in and of itself because he didn't need me to help him. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, that's just talent. Like you see an athlete who doesn't not very well coached, but he goes out and Terrell owns it because he's got athletic ability and he just knows he has intuition.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And so that when you hear me say a dog is only as good as he is, that's exactly what I'm talking about. A dog that doesn't let you help them when they're uncertain or insecure. They have an extreme self-belief, and you just got to accept that and let it be what it is. That's where Tanner would struggle in an aspect like that. But what's so neat about the Grand and what I think the Grand has helped me with so much personally is that extremely high standard that you have to strive for, that level of greatness that you have to seek. If you learn what the Grand standard is and you learn how to play the game, so to speak, how to run the marks, how to run the blinds, what they're looking for, and understand how difficult that standard is to chase. If you understand that and train for it, then you're going to it's going to translate to better dogs all the way around. Y'all give me 1 second. I hate to be rude. 1 second. Yes, sir. I'm actually on camera right now, Phil. I'll get somebody to bring me back. Y'all don't worry about. I mean, if it don't work out, I'll just get a ride back. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate you. Bye. Like I said, I left the field. And when I say I left the field, I left my truck trailer and all my dogs. And that was one of my training partners that had my truck. So I was just making sure that my dogs were good to go. But if you learn how to train for the Grand standard and the Grand level of greatness, it makes your dogs better. It doesn't just make your dog better. It makes you as a trainer better. And that kind of greatness translates to other events. That's one of the big reasons that I've had so much success in the Master National, in the Super Retriever Series, because I was always seeking that perfect level of what I felt like was a level of perfection that you have to strive for to be successful at the Grand. So, yes, sir.
Does training for the SRS help you with the Grand, or does training for the Grand or a Grand level dog help you with the SRS, or is that completely different things?
In my experience, it was training for the Grand made me better at the SRS, even though it's not some of the more excessive distances that you see at SRS. At the Grand, you're going to be limited. You're never going to see a mark longer than 200 yards. But the level of precision doing the work, at the Grand, they're not going to throw a 60-yard mark and allow your dog to run 100 yards past it and then turn around and come back without telling you need to handle your dog. The dogs have to learn to mark the bird where it fell and go to that area and hunt it. not just go running down across the field and hope they're going to find something, not just
accidentally get downwind of it and then go sniff it out.
Exactly. I mean, they've got to, that when they say they want to see your dog proceed directly to the area to fall and establish a hunt, I always pick on the judges and say, y'all misinterpreted the rule book. Y'all read directly where we said directly. Like, I'll get there directly. Y'all just don't know how to pronounce the word. But the point being made is that level of perfection that you look for, and like I said, you don't have to be perfect to pass the grant. You just, the key to it is don't give them anything to judge. Let your dog go out there and mark the birds, and they don't mind seeing a dog hunt for a mark. They just want to see them hunt in the area of the fall, in the hunt area, to go out there and say, this is where the bird is. They don't want to see your dog start hunting 60 yards from the bird and quarter the way to it. They want to see the dog run to the area of the fall and then start a hunt. And when they
game the way the game's supposed to be played.
That's right. And when they talk about running blinds, and they said that they want to see the dog respond promptly and precisely to all whistles and casts, they mean that. They want to see the dog stop and change directions the way that you're asking them to change directions. And understanding how that works, and without doing a bunch of excessive diagrams and all, that would be incredibly boring to most people here. You got to understand what they value and what they see as a refusal and what they see as a good cast, and then give them what they ask for. This is something that I preach across all different venues. Your job as a handler, speaking of myself, my job as a handler is not to change the way that judges see things. Rather, it's to understand what they value as judges and give them that. And simply say, okay, this is what they want. This is how I'm going to set my dog up for success. Your primary job as a handler in every venue that you ever run is to maximize your dog's strengths and minimize their weaknesses.
There's some good questions popping up, but I got to ask you this. So I'm sure the judges, but do they tell you what they're looking for? I've never been to a Grand. I cannot wait to go to the Grand. I'm going to be working most of the time photographing dogs, but I'm also going to be looking at this very differently because of the things that we've gone through over the past 3 or 4 months. It's going to be a big time enlightenment for me, because I get to see what that level, like all the things that we're doing, why you're doing it, and what you're trying to achieve when you get there. And so the judges, if you're saying you got to give the judges what they're asking for, did they tell you that when you step up to the plate?
Yes and no. They have long handler seminars for every test, because the judges want to make sure that they've covered all their bases, that the competitors have a clear understanding of the objectives of the test and what they're looking for. Yes, they're going to tell you that they want to see your dog walk in an orderly fashion under Grand level control. You hear that a lot at the Grand. We're going to judge to the Grand standard. We want to see you operate under Grand level control. Actually, it does not say at all. Nowhere in the rule books does it say anything about a dog walking at heel, but a dog who is at heel is obviously showing an expedition, a level of control. So they'll say they want to see you and your dog walk to the line under Grand level control. They want to see your dog mark to a Grand level. They want to see your dog run blinds at a Grand level. Are they going to go into a detailed exposition? No, not at that time. As a matter of fact, I don't know if they still do it. I don't think they do. But for many years, handlers were actually given the opportunity to not attend the judges seminar for the Grand with the judges, but the day before it started, they actually gave another judges seminar where handlers could come and sit in and listen to exactly what the judges were instructed on marking, on blind running. And so that was a huge learning opportunity that not enough people took advantage of.
Do they run a test dog?
Sir?
Do they run a test dog?
Yes, sir. Every series.
Okay.
Every series.
So it's similar to the test meeting and the test dog, the run of the test dog at an SRS. Like you all gather, you talk about the test, they run the test dog, then you go back, and then it starts.
Exactly. The thing that is hard to understand when you're just getting started running the Grand is, what is the Grand standard? What is the Grand level of expectation? That's what they're not going to tell you, because it's not their job to. I mean, it's when you see a Grand dog run a Grand test, there's no doubt in your mind that you just saw Grand work. So it's one of those things that you got to have to kind of learn as you go. But it's a beautiful thing to watch, and when you realize the aggregate of it, that's one of the great things when you see the Grand running right. You see dogs bobble, but like if you watch the statistics of how the Grand works, you'll see a lot of dogs go out on day one, and then you see a lot of dogs go out on day two, and you can assume, okay, those were the dogs that may have been, younger dogs, less experienced dogs that weren't running at the top of their game. You can assume things like that. But then you see the same level of dogs drop out in the third series, and usually the same level of dogs drop out in the fourth series. Normally it's somewhere around a third of the field is lost every day. And the reason that you start losing them in the third and the fourth series, or maybe they're hitting hard tests, but also the math's not adding up. Your marginal scores are adding up, and dogs are what we call pointing out. They don't have enough points to carry to the next series. So you actually see the math start catching them in the third and fourth series as well. So it's just amazing to see. You see a dog bobble and you go, man, hate that for them. But then they get called back and you go, man, that wasn't great work. Why'd they get called back? Because it's the Grand. You can have a marginal score, but that next marginal score is going to get you. So that's one of the neat things about it. And like I said, it doesn't matter how good you do on those other series. If you have your marginal score, there's no 3 at the Grand where you could say you did it so good you get extra bonus points. That's not how it works. It's just just be good. Just be good every time. You don't have to be perfect. Just get in and get out.
But you're not looking for trimmed fat. You're not looking at cutting corners. You're not looking at forgiveness or flexibility. When you step up to the plate, you're up there to do your job, and that's what the expectation is. So if you think of it any other way, you're not going to do well. Is that right?
That's exactly right. So you asked the question is when is a dog ready to run a Grand? The answer for me is when they're ready. And one of the barometers we usually use on that is the Master National, because the Master National is such a complimentary event. It's a multi-day national level event, just like the Grand. And the dogs can be good, and then they can be bad, and then they got to be really good again. But what the Master National does for me is let me see how a dog can handle a 5, 6, 7 day competition, living off a truck, pre-training for a week beforehand, living off a truck. It gives you an insight into their mentality. Are they getting better every series, or are they unraveling? Those are the kind of things that you want to see and kind of help give you an idea of what this dog's going to be when it runs the Grand. So, we use that a lot of times. I have several dogs on my truck this time around who already have Master National plates that have never run the Grand, but they're checking all the boxes. They're saying, hey, look, I can do this work. I can do this work. I can do this work. And they are fighting their way onto the truck in a way that I can't tell them no. And when I can't tell them no, that tells me that they're really, really ready, because years ago when you ran the Grand, you could only run 8 dogs, and then it was 12, and now it's unlimited. And I really liked it when there was a governing standard, because at that point it was very clear. It was this simple at my kennel. If you want to run the Grand, you got to be in the top 8 dogs, period. If you want to run the if you want to run the Grand, then it was 12. You got to be in the top 12. And now with it being unlimited, I have to pitch this to owners. I have to state this to owners that just because you can go doesn't mean you should yet. Let's not go. I don't take a dog to the Grand that doesn't have a chance to pass it. I don't understand why anybody would. If they're not super prepared, if they're not super ready to be great, I don't want them there. Not because they couldn't be in the future, just because I don't want to take a dog that can't be successful. One, because I don't like failure. I hate more than anything else making a call to an owner and telling them that their dog didn't pass. I hate that. But two, I don't want my owners to kick at that can so many times and not be successful. By the time the dog's actually ready to go, they're burned out on running it. So I'm just
where you passed it just because you ran it so many times.
Say that again.
You end up. I don't know if this is true. I'm just saying it sounds like a formula where you'd have a dog, you take it so many times it finally passes. It's almost like you forced it through or you pushed it through.
Yeah, see, that's where you're wrong. You don't get those mercy passes. And nobody asks you how many times you run the Grand and may be a Grand Hunt Retriever champion. That nobody worries about that. It is that hard to get to. What I'm worried about is I get a dog that's 4 or 5 years old that's been unsuccessful a few times, and the owners go, "Well, I just don't know if he's got what it takes." And I'm going, ho, now it's time to run. Now your dog's there. You see, and there's so many dogs that don't pass the Grand that are Grand caliber dogs. That's just because it's the Grand. It's so hard to achieve. It's so hard to do when you're ready to do it. The last thing I want to do is take a dog that's not ready. To answer Miss Gloria's question, which is a great one,
we got questions here we need to address.
Is the same level of excellence required at a weekend test to prepare you for the Grand? This is one of the big differences in HRC and AKC when it comes to their national level event. In AKC, you have to requalify every year. You have to get a certain amount of master passes to be able to qualify. That shows that you're ready to go. When you run HRC, once you become a Hunt Retriever champion, you are qualified. You never have to requalify for the Grand. Your Hunting Retriever champion status says that you are ready to go. In order to get a Hunting Retriever champion title, you have to have 100 points. It's exactly what Tanner has. He has 100 HRC points that allowed him to become a Hunting Retriever champion. But the best analogy I ever heard was that a 100-point dog is kind of like an 18-year-old at a bar. Just because you can get in the door doesn't mean you have any business being there. And that's usually what you see. Most 100-point dogs just don't have enough experience in running the game to be successful at the Grand. That's not to say 100-point dogs don't pass. It's just that is your qualification, but there's a difference between qualified and being ready.
If you're a baseball player, you're in the minor leagues or you play college baseball, and you haven't seen like every pitcher in the major leagues for the most part throws, say, 93 to 96 miles an hour, but there's a great many of them that throw 96 to 98 or 99 miles an hour. And if you haven't seen those types of pitches, you're not ready for it, and you can't go from where you are to the major leagues if you haven't seen a great number of fastballs in that 96 and 98 mile an hour range, because it's a completely different level. So how can you expect yourself to hit that ball if you've never seen it before?
Well, and I'll put it to you this way. This, in my opinion, is the much better analogy. I could have played Major League ball if all you ever did was throw a fastball. Because I can gear up and I can hit that fastball, I can anticipate it. That's not a problem. But what about the changeup? What about the breaking ball? That's what, so many minor leaguers. I think about Austin Riley, the third baseman for the Braves. He came up and hit, a bunch of home runs really fast until the scouting reports got out and they figured out if it wasn't straight, he couldn't hit it. And then he went through a massive slump because he was having to adjust to all the off-speed stuff. That's exactly what the Grand represents. You can't sit on fastball and think that you're going to make it through the Grand, because when something unexpected happens, now that is one of the great things about the Grand, in my opinion, is it's not faddish or trendy when it comes to what those first 4 series are going to be. A Grand test is always going to be a triple and a blind. Triple on land, triple on water, land blind, water blind. They're going to say, it's just like when I played high school football and we had a really good running game, and my offensive linemen were so arrogant that they would say, we're going to run here and y'all can't stop us. They would literally point. One of my tackles, he killed me. He'd say, we're coming right here. Because he wanted the extra challenge of everybody piling into that gap. That's the Grand is that way, in that they're going to tell you exactly what you're going to get. It's going to be a triple and a blind. Do the best you can. Do the best you can, because we're going to hit you with what we got. There's a lot more variation in the test when it comes to Master National concepts as far as what they may do. But that's one of the things, again, that I think makes that's so great about the Grand, is that they're not pulling tricks. They're not doing gimmicks in any kind of sense. They're just saying, here it is, go get it. So, Miss Gloria, the Grand standard is far and away higher than a weekend HRC test, where the Master National, although I believe the tests do have a tendency to be a little bit harder, maybe judged a little harder at the Master National level when it comes to AKC, their concept is the standard should be the same. The Master National standard should be the same as a weekend Master test. It's just a bigger, longer. As far as a Master test on the weekends, 3 series, the Master National, they shoot to try to do 6. But the standard's not supposed to change. Where in the Grand, that is very, very much not the case. Weekend standards do not apply when it comes to the Grand.
How many dogs do you have on your trailer for this event?
I am running 12. I have 2 more that is specifically on my truck for that owners are going to be running, and I have a bunch of other owners here with me who are going to be, running their own dogs. So I think my training group is probably somewhere in the mid-20s as far as how many dogs that we have. So we're responsible for all of those. And this is, 12 for me, this is probably the fewest number of dogs I've run in a long time, and I'm not complaining. I left a lot of other qualified dogs at the house that were qualified. They're just not ready. And so, I have to be a lot more strict as far as I could bring them now. I could load up the whole truck and bring them, but I can't stand the thought of not being successful. And I don't feel this is not an event where you throw more spaghetti at the wall and hope it sticks. This is not where you're going to get mercy passes. If you show up unprepared, the dogs that are running at a Grand level are going to get their Grand passes. Hopefully, if you don't have that, one of the truisms about the Grand is it's not what you run, but when you run. And what they're meaning by that is you don't need any bad luck. You don't need any good luck. You just don't need any bad luck. You see, a bad break, happen there. You think about how many dogs run each series, and they're trying to give every dog the same look, but the wind dies, or the wind shifts, or the sun is just not perfect for this dog, or clouds come over and cover the sun, and now that hard bird to see is even more invisible. Things like that happen every time, and it's nobody's fault. It is what it is. But, that bad break can put you behind the 8 ball, and then, your dog that is running at a Grand level doesn't pass because, it catches a bad break here and there. So that is a real part of the Grand and what you're running.
What would you say of all the dogs running the Grand? How many will fail, percentage wise?
It's been a little bit better the last couple of years, as far as there's been a little bit of an uptick in how many dogs have passed. But when I started running, the traditional pass rate was 17%.
Wow.
So that means that what?
Wow.
83% don't. The last couple of years, it's been somewhere in the low to mid 20s, I think.
That's lower than bow hunting success. Bow hunting success on bucks is about 25%. So I always know when 4 people show up, 1 guy's going to kill and 3's not.
That's right. That's right. So, it's extremely difficult. It's extremely difficult. And I thought
like 35 or 38%, something like that.
So how about this? This is the pitch that you have to, as a professional, make to your clients. When you run the Grand, you are inherently planning on failure. I mean, when you think about the stat, it is not in your favor. Oh, okay, I want to make my career off running the Grand. You're planning for failure. And I just told you, I hate calling and telling somebody that their dog didn't pass. I rather have bamboo show up under my fingernails than make those kind of calls. So that's one of the driving forces behind, how hard I train, how hard I work, is that if I make that phone call and say that, the dog didn't pass, the things that make it easier for me is, one, the great clients that I have who understand that failure is a possibility, and they understand that nobody's harder on me than me, and they let that kind of roll off their back. And so that's one of the parts. So, and 2 is knowing that when I do make that call and say, hey, we fell short this time, I know that I did everything I could do. I know that we prepared as hard as we possibly could, and we didn't walk to the line halfway, half cocked. You have the other crazy things that go down, you get sick, I get sick, the dog gets sick too, dog gets something in their eye and they can't see as well, or dog's not feeling well because their stomach's upset. Things like that affect outcome as well. So there's, so many different variables that you're trying to hold in place. Mr. Leonard said, people say right now that they are Grand training. What's the difference in your training during Grand training is different than your normal hunt test training. Part of what I would say there is that when you say my hunt test training, I don't really consider myself a hunt test trainer in the classical sense. If you come training with me on a normal basis, it looks nothing like a hunt test. There's a lot more drills. There's a lot of extremely difficult concept marks that go together, but it doesn't look like, in the Grand, you sit down, you shoot 3 marks with a shotgun, you pick up the triple, and you run the blind. You don't see much of that in my normal training. You don't see a pile of that in my Grand training, but my Grand training has one of the big emphases that I have is check down birds. Precision, not just on the long mark, but checking down and having a smart hunt when there's a reason for the dog to go long. All right, hold on one second. I'm checking. I'm learning about this drive thing. Am I still with you? Everything's good?
Yep, you're still good.
Okay. I think my battery might be starting to.
Some issues.
Say that again.
Someone reporting some issues?
No. I'm looking at this Surface Pro and it's saying something about battery saver mode. So check down birds are a big emphasis. Directional change on blinds is a big emphasis. Mr. Leonard, I can't. The next thing where Jake said, if you've ever been to one of my Grand seminars, you'll understand that's not a joke. I mean, we talk about what is the standard, what are the judges looking for, how do you avoid judgment, how do you become a better handler. These are some of the things that we hit on a pile. But right now, how does my training differ? I'm focusing on check down birds. I am really running good blinds. In between my marks, you need to be able to run down the shore water blinds and run them very well. That's one of their favorites. I'm sitting down and shooting a gun. Ironically, I don't do that a pile in my normal everyday training. And right now I'm sitting down with a shotgun, working on the dog swinging with the gun. That's something that is a fundamental tool that you have to have in order to be good at the grand. A dog that works well with a gun and stays inside the gun barrel and doesn't just jump all over the place. So that's some of the big differences that I'm doing, in my training right now. The truth be told, I don't like this last little part of, I don't do as many drills right now, which is different than my normal training. So that's one of the big differences. And I like to do a lot more drills. I like to do concept work a lot more, and I don't do as much of that right now because we're trying to get the dogs comfortable walking up there and seeing a triple and running a blind and saying that's sufficient work. That's what I'm looking for. Mr. Fields making a sideways comment about Boykins. Phil's the one that just called me while I was on camera, by the way. Thanks for the courtesy. Jeff Henderson says at the Grand you cannot recover if marginal. Master National, you can average up with points. You can average up. Now, when you say you can't recover, you can pass the Grand with a marginal score. Don't forget that. You can pass the Grand with a marginal score. You just can't have a bunch of marginal scores. That's not going to add up.
So when you're done at the Grand, 4 days, what does the scorecard look like for a dog that passed? Your average scorecard?
A perfect scorecard would be a 16. And I believe the lowest you can have, if I remember right, is a 13.
Wow.
So if you have a set of marginal scores, if you get ones one day, that means you would be at a 14. Correct?
Wow.
So, like I said, I think the lowest you can have is a 13.
Wow.
So that just shows you there's not a lot of wiggle room there.
And there's two judges. There's 2 judges for each test, or 3, or what?
There's 2 for each test. And one of the cool things about the Grand is that the judges stay at the site. So now it's a little different since we've gone to so many different flights. But when I started running, there were only 4 flights. And there were only 4 sets of judges. So if you got on there and you said, man, I really don't like this judge, yada, 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 it didn't matter if you loved them or if you disliked them. You had to run under every judge that was at the Grand in order to pass. Now that we have more than 4 flights, you could potentially miss the judges that you don't like or miss the judges that you really do. So it's a little bit different dynamic now, but they're all judging to the Grand standard, and they're all going to hold you accountable to the Grand work. And the grid judges, it doesn't matter if they like you or not. They're just judging the dog and the handler and the work, and they're not paying attention to who the person really is. So to Jeff's point, you can't bring yourself back up at the Grand, but you can pass. At the Master National, you can bring your average back up by running really good stuff. So that's the big difference.
So if you're a judge, all right, you're not running any dogs. You're a judge at the Grand this year, and can you give us a quick scenario of a test that you would pass a dog on a marginal score?
Okay, so let's say on one of the 3 marks, the dog had to handle to the area of a fall. The dog did not proceed directly to the area of the fall and establish a hunt, and the handler had to aid the dog to the mark. That would be a marginal score. That's one example of a marginal score. Or while the marks were falling, the dog was excessively outside the gun barrel, creeping while the birds were falling. One of the great things that I enjoy about the Grand is that the judges are supposed to watch the work and ask themselves, do I want to hunt with this dog? Is this a dog that I want to hunt with? So when you look at a lot of the markdowns come around behaviors that are undesirable in a hunting situation. Now, when it comes to the work, it's extremely high, extremely precise work. But a lot of the questions they're supposed to be asking are, is this a dog that I want to hunt with? So is that a good illustration of what a marginal score is?
Yeah, I understand. I mean, if you have to get your dog out of a jam and it works, then that's a marginal score. If you have to get your dog out of a jam and it fails, then you fail. If you don't have to get your dog out of a jam, then you're a pass.
You're a clear pass. There's not a marginal score. So I believe, if I remember right, I think the score sheet says fail, marginal, pass. That's the three categories they have, and a fail would be a 0, a marginal would be a 1, and a pass would be a 2. Go ahead.
What would be the one piece of advice that you would tell an amateur running his or her first grand?
I already told you.
That's her question.
I already told you. Don't give me anything to judge.
There you go.
It's that easy. If your dog goes out there and does the work, if you know they ran good marks and ran a good blind, you know what good work looks like. I mean, they're so.
Well, I guess thinking about what you're saying, what else can you say?
Exactly. It's that frustratingly easy. When it comes to, hey, here's what I'm looking for. Here's what they want. It's that frustratingly easy, but it's that exhaustingly difficult at the same time.
Don't turn the ball over.
Exactly.
You
don't have to fumble. You do not have to throw an interception.
In this game, you got 4 minutes left in the game. Do not turn the ball over.
Correct. Exactly. To answer Bennett's question, what's the longest marks and blind you will see at a grand? The maximum distance line of sight on a blind is 150 yards, which is 50 yards farther than a normal weekend test. The longest landmarks you can see are 200, and the longest watermarks you can see are 150. I believe that is exactly what the rule book states. So remember, cross your fingers, that is line of sight. I run a lot of blinds that are a lot longer than 150 yards because of the undulation of the land, things like that. So it's amazing how, I have never, ever, I hope a grand judge isn't watching this, I've never run a 150-yard blind at a grand. It's always magically 149. I have never heard the judges say it was 150 yards.
Huh.
But I have run a pile of 149 ones, and I've run some of the worst ones I've ever run have been 60 to 80 yards. They had so much clutter and difficulty. Those longer blinds, a lot of times they'll give them a little bit of room to breathe and roll, but those super tight ones, they can be murder on dogs.
That's pretty fun. You know what that reminds me of? I don't know why, but it reminds me of some cycling friends of mine. I made a silly statement one time. We were sitting at my bar and we were talking. I said, well, man, you can't really go out and get a workout in if you don't on a road bike if you don't ride a long ways. And one of them looked at me like I was a freaking idiot. And he goes, okay, go ride your bike up that mountain right there.
Exactly.
2-mile road, and I bet you can't even make it to the top.
That's right. And so a lot of times for me, one of the big differences you see in a lot of grand tests, you see a lot more decoys than a normal weekend test. You see a pile more attention to detail put into like brushing in the hides where the wingers and all are. Instead of it just being a camo holding blind out there, it will be, you can walk up to a grand test as a handler and not know where the marks are coming from. They're so well hidden and camouflaged with natural foliage. So that's another big aspect that you'll see when it comes to to the grand side of things. You said 107, right? So that's another big step that you got to look for, is that super duper attention to detail when it comes to the setups themselves. But me personally, what scares me is when you walk up and see a grand test and it looks very easy, very simple, because either it's not what it looks like to the eye and it's going to be way harder, or it's so simple and so straightforward that any bobble looks bigger than it really is. You know, when a dog doesn't go right to the bird and has to hunt a little bit, it looks worse because the test isn't as complex, doesn't appear as complex. So that scares me. When you walk up there and you go, man, this should be just
piece of cake.
Just a walk in the park. Cool. That scares me because I'm like, man, any little bobble looks so bad here.
What causes a dog to bobble on a simple test?
Well, Mike Lardy said you can throw a triple in a parking lot and somebody's gonna mess it up.
That's
true. And that's the rule. That's the rule of thumb. But it's the truth. I mean, it just dogs being dogs. Not seeing a mark, not catching a real good look at it. I mean, it could be anything. Getting a little bit too wide on a blind and not getting a good recovery cast. I mean, anything could happen at any time, and that's what's so hard, being so consistent.
No matter what type of discussion we have about anything in life, simplicity, the old phrase, simplicity is the ultimate form of sophistication, always comes into play. Whether it's it's a challenge or whether the simplicity is what gets you through something so well, you just keep it simple. That phrase always comes into play, and it seems like in every discussion. So that's really interesting.
And I always say, my statement is always that this is elegant in its simplicity. It looks so easy, but it is so beautiful because it's, it looks so simple, but it's not. So yeah, we have very similar takes on that. But Charlie Journey said that Run of the Grand was chasing a butterfly. That it's always trying to grab something that's forever moving. That was the analogy that he always used. I guess I haven't coined my phrase on it. I don't feel like it is chasing the butterfly as much as it maybe once upon a time was, but it is really about striving for excellence for a very long time. When you say that, striving for excellence for a very long time, it's not just striving for excellence for that week. It's the striving for excellence in all that training from obedience on. Folks ask me, when do you start training a grand dog? And I say the day that they start their work. Day one, we are trying to make a grand hunting retriever champion. Do we know it's going to take a long time? It's going to be a long road? Absolutely. And there's a pile of things that could happen between now and then. But if you don't start with the objective in mind, you won't get there. And it's a whole lot harder to change your mind and say, now I want to run the grand after a dog's 2 years into training. It can be a lot of rework involved.
I was actually thinking that at the beginning of this discussion. I was sitting there, I was thinking that exact thing myself, going, well, you don't just start training a dog for 2 years and go, well, let's train this dog for the grand. I mean,
exactly. Yeah. It's a very, very talented dog can run the grand if it has certain qualifications. But when you talk about, like I said, you don't have to have the most phenomenal dog in the world to have a grand hunt retriever champion. They got to be solid. They got to be solid from the base up. And I'd say probably the difference in my program now is when I first started, we take a lot more dogs that are not the superstars and make them grand hunt retriever champions, because we know what to do, how to do it, how to build the foundation, how to bring them up and get the most out of them. Where when I was first getting started, I mean, the dog had to be so much better to compensate for my lack of knowledge, just to compensate for my weaknesses, to make things, to the dog had to make up for so many of my insufficiencies as a trainer and handler. There's Miss Lois. She must be on her annual duck hunt, and that's the South Carolina girl that's hunting ducks in North Dakota right now.
Yeah. So Paul asked, do you have tips for managing the added on-the-line excitement for HRC Grand, leg gun, dog call or duck calls, buckets, and maintaining the grand level of control for a dog that mostly runs AKC?
Sure I do.
Don't address me.
I'm not going to tell Paul.
He's laughing. He's at home laughing. He's laughing right now because that's an inside joke between y'all.
There are 1,000 different gimmicks, 1,000 different tricks. The key is finding what works for your dog, Paul. And I know that's a dodgy answer, but it could be one of 1,000 things. I will tell you this much. The more I train, the less I have to worry about those gimmicks and alibis for a dog that mostly runs AKC, because the standard that we're holding the dogs to on a daily basis when it comes to obedience, compliance, line manner standard is so much higher. We don't let them get away. We don't let them get away with foolishness no matter where we're running. And that excitement that you're calling is actually a relaxation of standards that is allowed to happen over time. And we don't let the dogs get away with foolishness to start with, and it doesn't lead to poor behavior in the long run because we're holding the standard so high from the start.
I can't wait. I'm coming down. I'm telling you, after hunting season's over and before turkey season starts this winter, I'm coming to Georgia, bringing my cameraman with me and my dog, and we're gonna. I want to be like, I want to know what these people know.
Well, it's definitely a different game. It's not a better game or a worse game. It's just a different game. And like I said, no matter what you do, no matter what game you play, you got to know the rules and how to give the judges what they're looking for. And you do that, and you got a high chance of being successful.
That's
so Grand is unique, but it's a lot of fun.
The results come from the simplicity of the game, right? I mean, if you're gonna win a basketball game, you got to hit your free throws, right?
Yeah, I actually had that same analogy come to mind because you were asking about. You said, "Well, how could a dog mess up an easy setup?" And the first thing I thought of was, how does an NBA player miss a free throw?
Right.
Ask Shaquille O'Neal, right?
Shaquille O'Neal shot 65% free throws in his career, and he's a Hall of Famer. But when he got to the line at the end of the game, you just knew he was going to blow it.
But they also, and that's why they coined the phrase hack a shack.
What other important elements? We're actually going really. This is going really well. We got a great crowd too. What other elements?
If we got a great crowd, I'm going to have to figure out a way to really plug in because I'm about to lose. Yeah, it just gave me my next warning, and if it's anything like my laptop, that means it's kind of like Mama. There ain't a lot of time left. So you keep talking.
What other elements do we need to talk about the Grand? So I'm going to be there shooting photos, and you're talking about the hides being so well built for the throwers and whatnot, and talking to Mark Atwater about what we're going to be doing shooting photos. You know, he said bring your clippers and your saws because we're going to be cutting a lot of brush and literally building duck blinds to hide behind so the dogs don't see anything but the brush pile.
That's correct.
And that's for
and that's for the camera guy too. I mean, one of the cool things about Mark is he can be out there taking pictures and you don't even see him. He's even hidden better than a lot of the than a lot of the winger hides, because he's so committed to being there but not being seen. It's impressive. All right, guys, y'all gonna have to take a trip with me because I'm gonna have to figure out how to get this thing plugged in. And I think I got it.
I got a simple question for you too. So I'm bringing Tanner with me, and you got any tips for me? Because obviously I'm gonna be working all day, and Tanner's gonna be on my truck. You got any tips for me in terms of what I should bring to make sure my dog's gonna be okay in his crate?
A leash.
Besides that,
you definitely want to be able to, we'll make sure that there's some folks that are there to help keep him aired, but you don't want to let that crazy idiot out without
not in that crowd,
without some supervision, because a lead first and foremost, and anything else you might think you would be necessary in order to keep him safe and healthy. So, plenty of water, maybe a fan, even though the weather's cooling off. A fan wouldn't be a bad idea, because you might, no matter where you park, when you try to get in the shade, when you're stuck out there taking pictures all day, that sun's going to move. So, and those like the DeWalt fans that you buy at Lowe's or wherever, they have the same battery pack that runs a drill. Those things they're incredible.
Oh, I saw those at that Coonhound event up in Autumn Oaks, and I was like, I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm gonna go buy one tomorrow.
I mean, they'll run 12, 15 hours and put out some really good, and direct air right on the dog. So that's one thing, be a big plus. But other than that, just your normal necessities. Kendra said she's going to make sure Tanner gets to potty, but I can promise you Tanner doesn't get to come off that truck without a lean on him. Because
you know what the first thing he's going to do? He will literally be nose down, sniffing the entire grounds, trying to find every potato chip on the ground.
So, Tyler said, what's the difference in the standard of line manners at the Grand versus a regular weekend? They are a little bit tighter. The Grand got a bad reputation for a while as being an obedience competition. You have to have perfect obedience. They have definitely overcome that, in my opinion. That doesn't apply anymore, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to, you need, again, they're asking the question, do I want to hunt with this dog? Is this a dog that I want to spend time with? So typically they use the gun barrel as a demarcator for the dog's, obedience. And as long as the dog stays inside the gun barrel, is quiet and attentive while the birds are falling, and doesn't have hyperactivity going on, you're going to be just fine. Yeah, I was afraid Jake was going to mention that, since you're there, you might as well be able to run test dog. The only way we're doing that is if it's on camera. That's all I'm saying. Hey, how cool a diagram would that be? This is why you're not ready for the Grand, because you can't do that.
That'd be a good show. Entertaining show.
No doubt. Not to miss, Eric asked a question. Remember, the Grand's got 4 days of retriever work and 1 day of upland.
Yeah, that's a great question.
How do I prepare for upland at the Grand? True story. Honest to goodness, I haven't lied to y'all yet, and I'm not going to start. In my opinion, there are 2 ways to train for the upland at the Grand. One is to train upland all the time, so that your dog truly knows how to what an upland test is, what's expected from it, and how to operate in an upland field. The second is never do it. There are so many things about upland that are contrary to everything else in retriever training. In upland, you're telling the dog to put its nose down, honor its nose, run crooked lines, and find the bird in a self-motivated fashion. wherein when you start talking about the dogs running blinds at the Grand, you're saying don't use your nose, keep your head up, run straight, sit on the whistle when I tell you to, change directions. Upland training and Grand and blind training, they don't run hand in hand. Does that make sense? You blink. Upland training and Grand and blind training don't go hand in hand. It takes a special dog that can do both consistently. And I've always been of the opinion you get ready for the first 4 days and then handle day number 5, then start showing up ready for day number 5 and not be ready for the first 4. So I do a lot of training on Tuesday afternoons. If the Grand starts on a Saturday and Upland's on Wednesday, Tuesday afternoon I'm worried about the Upland. And that's and a lot of these guys that they work on Upland preserves or they do Upland work on the regular. That's great. And some of my best dogs are dogs that are conditioned that way. But for a normal Grand dog, I only do Upland when it's day 4.5 and I'm getting ready for 5. I'll put it this way. Dude's got the record. Dude passed 15 Grands. Do you know how many Upland tests dude ran in his life?
0.
15.
Well, besides the Grand.
That was the only time he ever ran Upland.
So it's really not about training for the Upland. It's about having control.
Say that again.
I'm not stating this. I'm asking. It just sounds like it. So it's not really about training for Upland as much as it is how much control you have over your dog and how much control your dog is willing to give you. Is that right?
Yeah, and see, I'm such a big stickler about whistle sit that it translates pretty well because you have to sit on a whistle. Mr. Leonard said that the Upland at the Grand doesn't seem to be as challenging as a normal Upland test, and I would not disagree with that one bit. The Upland at the Grand is about you have to show that you can honor. You pick up a walk up, you flush a bird, and have to be steady to flush and to shot, and that's really it. That you don't have to run a challenging pattern. Would a typical Spaniel person come out and say that the Upland at the Grand is a credit to Upland hunting in general? I doubt it. I seriously doubt it. But it is one of the aspects to show that a Grand dog is versatile at all aspects, that it can go hunt Upland and go be a non-slip retriever. It is a test of all the different functions. So it's a necessary aspect of the Grand. They want to see it done. And again, it's not my job to make it the components what everybody wants it to be. My job is to know what those components are and to give the judges what they're looking for. That simple. Jeff said, day before Upland series is a tough day for the dog and the trainer. Absolutely. I remember I only had 9 dogs past that Grand in Tennessee. I caught the long walk on day 4, and between the walk to the line, to the walk to the test, and then to the line and back, and then Upland training, and then running Upland the next day, I did 19 miles in 2 days. Sir,
do you eat?
Sometimes not. We go on the fly, but it is definitely it can be a grueling task, and a lot of that depends on how many dogs you have in, how long the walk is from the gallery or from where they're staging the trucks to be parked to the line. There's a lot of factors that play in that, but
I think because of the COVID situation and the rules that they're going to try to play by. Do you think it's going to be more spread out, longer? How's that going to play out this time relative to the normal?
I doubt it. I doubt it's going to be more spread out because it's already so, you'll understand it when you see it. You know, everybody's not parked on top of each other anyway. I dearly hope not. I'll put it that way. And it's challenging enough to find an area large enough to. I think the flights this time around are going to have like 90 dogs in them. You think 90 vehicles without trailers behind them? How big a space do you need? And then you compound that with big rigs and the ability for the dogs to be able to get off the truck and move around in air. You know, it takes a pretty sizable space even without trying to increase the distancing aspect. So I don't see how they could spread it out much more. How about that?
Got it. Well, I'm looking forward to it, man. This obviously is going to be my first Grand. I've only been to a handful of little HRC hunt tests, and you know, with all the things that we've been doing over the past 3 or 4 months, Stephen, I'm really excited about it. I'm going to be working, but I'm also going to be looking at these dogs pretty hard because I'm going to be looking at through a 600 millimeter prime lens in my Canon. So
you'll see a lot, but I can assure you, you'll never see you won't see it the way you have in the past. You will see how many people make mistakes that leads to dogs failing, not just dogs failing. Everybody says, "Oh, the dog failed the Grand." That's not always true. A lot of times the people cause the dog to fail the Grand. You just see so many different. You see people make boneheaded mistakes that they would never do on a weekend. That they make a mistake because it's the Grand and they let it get bigger than it is. But it's a great thing. It's a great accomplishment. It's super difficult, and it's kind of a misery loves company atmosphere a lot of times. With you're getting it through it together with your buddies that are there, and you know you see how many times you can get hit in the gut and stand up and do it again. But it's worth it at the end. You know, the accomplishment speaks for itself. Any dogs that's ever passed a Grand once deserves recognition. I mean, it is that difficult.
How many passes do you have to get your title?
You have to have 2 passes and 300 HRC points. So, for instance, Tanner has 100 points, which qualifies him. You get 40 points. Hold on. You get 40 points for passing a Grand. So you could get your HRCH and pass 2 Grands, and you still need another 120 points to be a Grand champion. Not very many dogs get their second Grand pass and still need points. Most of them have run enough tests, you know, and it's taken that long to get there that they very few need their points to finish out their title. Most dogs need that next pass.
Gotcha. Anything else we need to cover? You looking tired? You feeling tired?
Supper. How about that? Supper. Guys, I'm enjoying it. I'm glad to be out training. I'm glad to be getting ready for this thing. I'll be glad when it's done, and then we're going to miss next week because me and Jake are both going to be grueling and grinding, and
wait to get on.
Then we'll see what else we got to go. What we got to come up with for the next couple of weeks. I think we're going to have a lot to keep y'all entertained going forward, and appreciate everybody taking time out of their day to spend with us.
Yeah, thank you guys so much, man. I feel the support, even though I'm not doing anything here. I'm just going to take photos. Some of you guys made some comments, and I really appreciate it. Even if it is, you're going to enjoy it. I just love the support and camaraderie, and that's one of the things I'm looking forward to. So whoever's on here regularly or not, please, if you see me toting a big fat camera lens, don't hesitate to stop and say hi, introduce yourself, because I want to meet everybody that I can. And again, thanks for your time, Stephen. As always, thanks for your time, your expertise, and all the things you bring to the table. We're all learning a lot. We're all enjoying it, and it's very engaging. Thank you so much. Good luck at the Grand. Looking forward to seeing you. I'll actually be there the night of – what night is it? Thursday night, the 8th. I'll be – Are you okay? Well,
I'm not coming in until Friday. I'm training a good bit away, so I won't see you till
We'll be building
Till Friday.
on Friday, all day Friday. So I'll see you Friday afternoon. Y'all be careful.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate